Hello there everyone, and welcome to the Roundup, two wise guys' show covering the week's hard news stories. I'm your host, Dan, recording this episode on Wednesday, July 5th, 2017, and thanks for tuning in today. For those of you who checked in on episode 1, welcome back, and my apologies for the poor sound quality on the recording. I'd like to blame it on technical problems, but to be honest, I think it was more user error than anything else. Going forward, it'll be much better without any of the same problems. But with that said, let's get into our first headline. Our first headline comes to us from the BBC, and it's obviously one of the bigger news stories of the week about the North Korean missile launch. If you're not familiar with this story, I suggest you look it up. I'm not going to go into all the details here about it, but it's a really big story. It's worth looking up and looking into. And the headline reads: North Korea missile. U.S. says that U.S. says that it will use military force, quote, if we must. The U.S. has said that it will use its considerable military forces on North Korea if we must, following Tuesday's long-range missile test. So if you're not familiar with what was going on Tuesday, which was the 4th of July, Kim Jong-un had his military test their very first intercontinental ballistic missile, or an ICBM for short. It's bad news. It's not good, because honestly, Kim Jong-un is crazy, and it sounds like he wants to start a nuclear war. But every missile test that they've done so far have been medium to long-range missiles. They haven't had any intercontinental missiles until now. It's not, from what I saw, it's not far enough. It doesn't have the capability to go all the way to the mainland United States, but from the things that I saw, it looks like the missile could hit Alaska, possibly Hawaii, obviously all of Asia, Eastern Asia, Southeast Asia, the oceanic regions, and probably even into Europe, or maybe even the Middle East. So, excuse me. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. The article continues saying that Ambassador Haley said on Wednesday that North Korea's test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile was quickly closing off the possibility of a diplomatic solution. They go on to discuss possibilities of further sanctions against North Korea in this situation. The French ambassador told the UN Security Council that France also favors a new resolution on North Korea, which would tighten sanctions. Russia and China both condemn the act, but are calling for cessation of hostilities. In response, the United States and South Korea conducted more military exercises. So it's kind of one of those things where it's a vicious circle. What North Korea does something, and so in response, the U.S. and South Korea start doing military exercises to show that they're prepared for any eventualities. And in response to those military trials and drills, North Korea does something else, and it's just escalating very quickly. So, again, pray for peace, and let's just all hope that this gets sorted out. Alright, our second headline for the week also comes from the BBC. It features the story of Charlie Gard. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this story, but it's a really sad one. Basically, it's a little boy, I think he's 10 months old, over in England, and he has got some genetic disease, which I'll get to in just a minute. I'll kind of touch on it from the article. But he's been in the hospital since October, and his condition has deteriorated. He's on life support right now, non-responsive pretty much, and it's a story it's sad, but it's also infuriating at the same time. He's in the care of the British NHS. NHS. I don't know why I said NCS. NHS, the National Healthcare Service. And his parents want to take him out of the hospital. They want to be with him. They've raised, I think, $1.3 million. £1.3 million to be able to bring him over to the United States for experimental treatments. and the British government is saying no, that they can't. They're not going to let the parents take the baby out of the hospital because they know best. So here's the story. Headline: Charlie Gard, Boris Johnson says baby cannot be moved to the Vatican. Okay, and let's just get into it. It is impossible for terminally ill Charlie Gard to be transferred to the Vatican's Children's Hospital for treatment, Boris Johnson has said. So yeah, the baby is 10 months old, and as I said before, the parents have raised a ton of money on crowdsourcing sites to try and save their child any way that they possibly can. The doctors are here basically saying that there's nothing else that can be done, and that trying to move the child would be outside of his best interests. And it's infuriating because it's like these parents want to do whatever they possibly can to save their baby. So what these doctors are telling them is that this baby's going to die, and that they're going to take him off life support. So they're going to kill him. They're going to kill this little 10-month-old baby because there's nothing else that can be done. But rather than giving the parents the option of taking their child and going to pursue whatever avenue possible. I mean, President Trump has tweeted that they are welcome to bring their baby over here and seek treatment anyway. We want to help any way that we can. The Pope Francis came out and said that he hopes that the parents will be able to do whatever they can to save their child until the very end. And as we saw in here just a second ago, the Vatican's Children's Hospital has offered to continue treatment for the child. But the British government is now saying, no, you can't take your baby out of here because we know best. And this is really messed up. This is a really messed up story. Mr. Johnson has told his Italian counterpart it is, quote, right that decisions continue to be led by expert medical opinions supported by the courts, in line with Charlie's, quote, best interests. So my question is, if this child's already going to die, how is it in his best interest to simply take him off life support and let him die, rather than allowing him the opportunity to receive treatment that may or may not prolong his life, may or may not improve his life? But if he's already suffering, he's already dying, why not just let the parents help him? I just don't understand it. The article continues, as I said before, Charlie's parents raised £1.3 million on a crowdfunding site to pay for experimental treatment in the U.S., but they lost a legal battle with the hospital last month after judges in the European Court of Human Rights concluded further treatment would, quote, continue to cause Charlie significant harm. Again, the child is dying. How is it going to cause him more harm? I don't really understand it. But the Vatican's pediatric hospital stepped in after Pope Francis called for Charlie's parents to be allowed to accompany and treat their child to the end. So yeah, again, if you're a believer, be praying for this family. This has got to be so hard for them. And I really hope that England gets this together. I like England. I like what they stand for, the UK in general, but there's been a number of issues, the situation with, the situation with Theresa May and the encryption and everything like that, with since the terrorist attacks that have been going on, and it just seems like they're becoming more and more closed off and more fascistic in a lot of their actions, and I don't really understand why they're going that route. But yeah, so let's just keep an eye on that and see where it goes. I really sincerely hope that the parents will be able to help their child any way that they can. Our next article comes to us from The Guardian. It's titled, "The Kids Are All White. Can U.S. Festivals Live Up to Their Post-Racial Promise?" The tagline on this one, again, I mentioned this last week, a lot of these British headlines are very long for some reason. With the subtitle on here, some of America's biggest music festivals build themselves as oasis of equality, but a closer look reveals an awkward and at times uncomfortable picture, with a picture of a bunch of teeny bopper white girls sitting in front of barricade at a concert there. I'll be honest, I almost didn't share this because this is such a stupid story. It really is. The article goes into the makeup of Americans aged 18 to 35. The prime festival demographic is 58% white, 13% black, 5% Asian, 20% Hispanic as of the 2010 census. Numbers drawn from Nielsen suggest that white people comprise 69.2% of the festival-going public, which in itself is not an overwhelming overrepresentation, but direct statistics from single festivals paint a different picture. Burning Man, not a music festival per se, but still a preeminent entity in the festival culture, released figures in 2014 listing their attendees as 87% white in a 2013 poll on the festival's website. Coachella goers were only 4.9% black. So I really don't understand why this is such a big deal. I've seen it on a number of other American websites, and now it's over. Obviously, they're talking about this American phenomena over in England, and I don't understand it. Nobody's telling black or Asians or Hispanic people that they can't go to these festivals or concerts. And people should be free to choose to do what they want to do and how to spend their money. I feel like we just really need to stop trying to controversify everything. Not everything is racially charged, and to be honest, doing this seriously reduces the gravity of legitimate racist acts and events. Like if a black person doesn't want to go to a music festival, they shouldn't have to, just to fill some demographic quota. If an Asian doesn't want to go to a rap concert, they don't have to. If a white person doesn't want to go to a rock concert, they don't have to. It shouldn't matter. The article continues. This is a quote from Matthew Morgan, who is the founder of the Afropunk Festival, where he says, quote, "It's awful for me, participating in an audience, particularly with rap lyrics, when you have a majority white crowd in the audience using the N-word, is a very uncomfortable environment. This awkward appropriation of other cultures rankles many artists who perform the very same festivals." So, in reading that, my question is the issue here the fans singing the lyrics with racial slurs, or is the content of the lyrics themselves the issue? Because my general view on it is, how about we just stop using the N-word altogether and let it die the horrible death that it deserves? But it's something that's perpetuated within the rap and hip-hop culture. And if you're going to use it, I get it, but an artist does have to have some level of responsibility for the content of their intellectual property. Just the same as, Chris and I on this channel have to have some level of responsibility for our intellectual property. Just the same as, any of my friends who are writers have to have a level of responsibility for their own works. There's a level of interpretation when it comes to intellectual property, and in particular music and art, but at the same time, it's like, you can't discriminate against your fans. People are going to like your music if they like your music. And Morgan continues that it's a case of opportunism and greed, saying, quote, these promoters predominantly don't care because they're selling tickets. And my response is yes, that's exactly the point. It shouldn't matter the skin color of your fans. No one has a right to own culture or own a style of music. It's something that music is something that transcends culture. It transcends race. It transcends nationality. That's why so many American artists are so popular overseas, and that's why occasionally we will get a good example would be Psy from South Korea. A few years ago he released that song Gangnam Style, and it took off. It was huge here in America, and none of us could understand a word of what he was saying because most of us don't know Korean. But it was a catchy song. It was phenomenal. If you actually look at the lyrics, it's actually kind of a funny song too. But you can't act like you own a culture. It's not like you can own a style of music. And this article continues. I'm not going to read any more from it because, as I said before, it's just stupid. But if you want to check it out, there'll be a link in the show notes for you. the final headline for the week is an op-ed from the BBC titled, "What if the internet stopped working for a day?" This was an interesting article to me. Most of you know by now that I'm really into technology, and I've been using the internet since I was a little kid, and like most people have at this point in time. So this was an interesting concept. It's something that I've thought about a lot in the past, so I kind of wanted to see what this author's take on it was. And she begins by quoting a Stanford University professor named Jeff Hancock, who says that before 2008, he would sometimes challenge his students to stay off the internet for 48 hours and then discuss how it affected them. And it says that when he returned to work in 2009 after a year-long sabbatical, things had rapidly changed, which if you think about, think back to 2008 and 2009, for those of you who are old enough to really remember, this was a time when iPhones weren't a thing until 2007. They weren't really taken off until around that time. I think it was around that time. It might have been 2008 that they came around. I remember in 2008, my wife and I got our first BlackBerries, our first quote-unquote smartphones. And, it was a BlackBerry curve. It couldn't do much more than check your email, maybe pull up a map on the browser. But the browser was really small. It didn't have a good screen. It wasn't anything near what smartphones are today. And the actual original iPod was only 6 or 7 years old at this point. So, things have started changing rapidly. But the idea that only a year has gone by, and this is what happened. He says, when I tried to introduce the task of staying off the internet for 48 hours, there was a class revolt, says Hancock, who studies the psychological and social processes involved in online communication. The students emphatically said the assignment was impossible and unfair. How it's unfair, I don't really understand, but it says that they argued that going offline even for a weekend could prevent them from completing their work in other classes, ruin their social lives, and make their friends and family worry that something terrible had happened to them. It's just interesting. And as somebody who grew up with the internet, I grew up in a house where we've had internet since it became a thing. Since it was commercially available in 1995, my family has always had access to the internet, and it's something that I'm very thankful for. It's something that has been a powerful tool. It's been a lot of fun. Obviously, there's a dark side to the internet, so you got to be careful with that. But it's provided an opportunity to learn and to grow and to meet other people, exchange ideas and things like that. But I don't think I would ever actually be able to identify it with this. The idea that, I can kind of see, it would prevent them from completing work in other classes. For instance, I do all my classes online, so I can't exactly go to a classroom because my school is in Arizona, and I'm in South Carolina. So all my schoolwork is done online. So I can see that, especially, but this was also in 2009. This was a time when online classes were a thing, but they weren't really a thing, if you know what I mean. Like they were around, but they weren't as prevalent as they are today. But the idea that it would ruin their social lives and that their friends and family would worry that something terrible had happened to them. Now, I get it that this is the time when Twitter was taking off and that Facebook was really big and popular, but call somebody. Make a status update, do a tweet, let people know, hey, for the next 48 hours, I'm going offline for an experiment. It's as simple as that. Everyone can see what's going on. They'll know why you're not there. And honestly, if your social life is so tied to the internet, then that's really a problem. And I know that I'm probably offending some people when I say that, but it's just the honest to God truth. Hancock continues saying that, that was 2009. And now with mobile as present as it is, I don't even know what students would do if I asked them to do that. They'd probably report me to the university president. It's interesting. And I mentioned, being online with my family since 95 when it first became a thing. And they actually include some interesting statistics in this article. It says in 95, fewer than 1% of the world's population was online. Fast forward 20 years to today, and more than 3.5 billion people in the world, that's about half people on the planet, have internet access. That's a huge change. In 20 years, think about that. 20 years before the internet, most people didn't even have a personal computer. most of the places that had computers were libraries. They were university research labs. They were government offices. They maybe even I'm not exactly sure how it was in '75, but maybe office buildings themselves. I don't know. Maybe they were still using typewriters. If any of you are old enough to remember, maybe leave a note or leave a comment or send me an email. Let me know, because I'm curious. But yeah, it's crazy how much things have changed over time. And according to the Pew Research Center, a fifth of all Americans say that they use the internet, quote, almost constantly, and 73% saying that they use it at least daily. Now, I can relate. I use the internet a lot. I'm not going to lie. I stream a lot of music. I stream videos and stuff, watch Netflix like everybody else on YouTube. Obviously, do this show as a podcast. The Two Wise Guys live broadcast is on YouTube Live. So we use the internet a lot. And so I can definitely relate to that aspect of it. A few months ago, Hurricane Matthew came through this area, and it knocked our power out for about 11 hours. It wasn't too bad, and it was on a Saturday, and I was supposed to be teaching a Sunday school class the next morning, and I'm a procrastinator, so of course I didn't have it ready ahead of time, as I should have. So my usual approach to it is I'll just wait and I'll get it done the night before the class, and then I'll go in and teach the class. That way it's fresh on my mind, and I take time to pray about it, and if the Lord places something on my heart in particular, then it's relevant to the next morning, as opposed to being something from maybe something that I in my own will had thought up a week before, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. But that day the internet was out, and I have tons of books, tons of theology books, tons of Bible study books. And so I'm like, that's fine. I got it. So I sat down. I worked on it for about 3 hours and barely put a dent into preparing the class. It's been so long since I've had to sit down with actual physical books and reference materials and try and get it all sorted out. Try to remember, okay, where is this? What page is this on? How do I need to reference this? All these different details. 3 hours go by. I barely do any work on the actual planning itself, because I'm so busy trying to find all the resources that I'm going to need to put the thing together. And then the internet comes back on, and I'm able to get it done in 30 minutes. It was, it definitely is a powerful tool. So I can kind of relate in some degree. But it's just crazy that 1 in 5 Americans say that they're almost constantly using the internet. William Dutton at Michigan State University is quoted in here as well, saying that one of the biggest problems with the internet today is that people take it for granted, yet they don't understand the degree to which we've allowed it to infiltrate almost every aspect of our lives. And that's a brilliant insight. I'm intrigued, because this guy apparently has a book. I want to pick it up. So it's called Society and the Internet. I'll try and link it in the show notes as well, but it's referenced in this article itself. It's a fascinating understanding of it that we really do take it for granted. Like we go around places and we just assume that Wi-Fi is going to be available, and we assume that we're going to be able to, hop on the internet, that we're going to have a good internet signal for our phones, that, we're going to be able to get onto Facebook, onto Twitter, onto, whatever your social media platform is that you're fancying these days. Or even that you'll be able to, a good example, somebody asks a question you don't know, and you say, oh, just hang on. You pull out your phone, you look it up, and you got the answer right there. Or if you're traveling somewhere and you start driving and you don't have your phone, all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I don't know how to get to where I'm going, because you don't have your GPS with you on your phone. That kind of thing. So it's interesting, and I'm intrigued by the idea of how this is going to impact us going forward, especially with the advancements and the Internet of Things and all of these new gadgets that are coming out. Like we mentioned last week in the Roundup, the Amazon Echo becoming an intercom service, and I read a little bit more about it and realized that it's not simply an in-house thing. You can definitely use it within your house, and you can use it outside your house, but as far as I understand it, it actually is an intercom system that connects to any other Echo around the world, or at least around the country, maybe not the world. But I mean, it goes to to anyone's Echo if you have access to it. You can go to people's phones, so you can directly message people on their phones if they have the Echo app on there. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how this goes. So this is a really good article. I really recommend you read it. It might be something worth looking into. And it goes through and gives some hypotheticals of like what it might be like if the internet stopped working for a day. But I would encourage you to even consider, what if it stopped working altogether? Would you be able to function if there was no more internet, if it got shut down by a state actor, or if it got shut down by an EMP or a solar flare or something like that, some catastrophic event? Or even if maybe you just fall on hard times and you don't have the money to pay for internet anymore and you don't have access to it, would you be able to make it through your daily life without having that access? So it's just something to think about, and I think it's a pretty fascinating article. So if you're interested, again, all these will be in the show notes. But this is all for the episode of the Roundup today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you want to, head on over to twowiseguys.org/contact and let me know what you think. You can also find me on Twitter at RebornJumpman or on my website at ancientabandon.com. Also, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for tuning in today, and I'll catch you all next week.